The one thing that I just want to say to all of the Pinay poets and MCs that are out there starting out, you have to make sure that when you speak, you are speaking in a way where you sound like you are believing everything that you are saying. If you don't act like you believe in the words that are coming out of your mouth, nobody else is going to believe you. You are a bad bitch. These are your words. Go ahead and say them. My name is Faith Santilla. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, and I'm a first-generation Filipino American. People should be activists. I think that everybody can play a role, particularly with the word revolution. Revolution is a word that is so often used in this country that the meaning is a little bit lost. There's always this tendency to be like super hardcore and have a certain set of principles that you're either with us or you're against us. You either know this or you don't know it, and fuck all that. I've been involved in this movement for such a long time that if we believe in freedom, if we believe in justice, we're not gonna win that with a small subset of people that can recite by memory Marx or Mao or Frederick Engels or anything like that. Just so long as your spirit is good and you know fundamentally what you believe in, that you want to see people not suffer, that you don't want to see bombs killing children, that's good enough. My mom came from Tondo, grew up super poor. She was the first one in her family to go to college. She was actually recruited by this US employment agency to become a teacher in the US. And so she was the first one to leave of her immediate family. Turns out that recruitment company that recruited her to come here was a complete farce. They took her passport, they took her money, so she was here undocumented for quite some time, not working as a teacher. And so I think that's really kind of a lot of where my political point of view comes from, is really her experience.
When the decision is between death or prison, especially when you have children, there is no choice at all.
The value that you bring to people's freedom and people's liberation and the fight for all of that is your art. I want artists to realize that they are critical to any movement, especially when you talk about poor people's movements. If you go into these indigenous communities in places like Chiapas or even in the Philippines where people can't necessarily read, art is what helps make revolution accessible to people. It is even poor people who may not be able to read that I think I've spoken to that have the most profound understanding of what the roots of oppression are. My dad, he came from Pangasinan, is Ilocano. He was a teacher as well, but in the university system. And he eventually became very active in the anti-martial law movement. There was a price put on his head eventually because of his association with a lot of the student activists in the university system in the Philippines. And so he came here as a political refugee. And so that's kind of where my roots are.
Mass confusion, worldwide disillusion.
Here's how I became a poet. So I became active in organizing in the Filipino community to get Filipino Americans to support the revolution back home in the Philippines. My task, as far as I was concerned, was to organize young Filipino Americans and get them to understand what was going on in the Philippines and how they can play a role. A bunch of like white activists who would come, but not like regular ass Filipino youth. Spoken word was a thing back then, like in the late 90s, so I said, all right, I'm just gonna do some spoken word, and maybe that'll be the way that we can attract young Filipino Americans to our events. And so it was really for practical reasons that I started writing poetry. It wasn't because I felt like there is this void in my, in my life, or that like I needed to bare my soul. I really wanted to attract cool young Filipinos to our events, and apparently it worked. And then it turns out I'm actually pretty good at it. So that's how it started. And I didn't think I'd actually still be performing to this day. I think I started writing when I was 19. I was very active as a poet when I was younger. I did get some shine, some attention. Decades later, I met Bamboo. He was obviously in the middle of like building his rap repertoire and creating music, and one day he said, I want you to be on one of my albums, and I was like, I don't really do that anymore. And he said, no, you still do. You were one of the people I listened to when he was coming up, and so he said, please, can you write something? And so I did, and I think once I got on one of Bam's albums, that's when people started asking for more poetry from me. So that's why I'm here, still doing it. My personal story that got me to actually become a union organizer. I had my daughter, Makaria, pretty young. I was 22 or 23. Me and my daughter and her dad, we were living in Jersey City, and right after 9/11 hit, the job that I had lined up, which was supposed to be in Lower Manhattan, was completely gone. So I worked retail. I was earning like $9.50 an hour. I remember one of the first things I asked my boss was, where do I sign up for health insurance? And they said, oh no, we only offer health insurance to full-time employees here. I have a little girl, I need health insurance. And so my boss said, okay, let me look into it. And she said, here's the form, you can fill it out. It's health insurance for part-time employees. And so I said, great. So I filled it out. I didn't think anything of it. I remember opening my paycheck after they took out the cost of my health insurance. My check was about $7. I remember going to the grocery store that night and being like, so I can afford bread or I can afford cheese. I can't afford both. That was just kind of the beginning of my own personal consciousness raising. On Bamboo's Party Worker album, there's a poem I have, and it's called Bread. It's literally about that story.
Racked a couple of items because we had to stretch this stack. Thought that we were straight, so we bounced, but really instead ended up leaving with half a meal, got cheese, but couldn't get bread.
And then one day my daughter got really sick. It was in the middle of winter, Jersey. I strapped her in the car, drove her to one hospital. I gave them my insurance card and they said, we don't accept this insurance. You should go to Jersey City. Drove to Jersey City. They said, we don't accept this insurance. Go to the Catholic hospital. And even though they're Catholic, you know, they're not supposed to turn anybody away. They turned us away. And so by the time I made it back to the original hospital, and I said, look, I know you don't accept my insurance. Please, I just need somebody to see my kid. They told me that my insurance isn't actually an insurance program, it's a reimbursement program. So you pay up front and then you submit a form and they'll reimburse you. And that visit to the hospital was $7,000. I remember once my daughter got better, I walked into J. Crew, which is where I was working at the time. And I said, you have no idea what I went through just trying to get a doctor to see my daughter. There are other people that work here who have children as well, and it's not right. And so I said, fuck it, I'm out, I quit. And then I got a job as a union organizer. And that was probably the thing that really kind of cemented for me what my purpose in life is supposed to be. The Us song. I was not originally supposed to be on that song, and I'm not gonna tell you who originally was on the song because you wouldn't believe me. But Ruby was in the middle of recording Circa 91, and they had a male artist actually record the bridge, and Fat Gums was producing it, and he said, Ruby, I think we need to go with like a different vibe. Let me reach out to Faith. I will also say the women of Beat Rock are also people who have helped build this political yet artistic home for me. All of the Beat Rock artists have. Being able to be surrounded by people like Ruby and Classy and Rocky, and to have like a sisterhood. And Gums said to me, like, we really need you to do a poem for this song.
Your DNA contains building blocks made from the mud of over 500 years of resistance and survival. And when you are ready, sis, we'll be right here, right here.
As an activist, your day job has to stay your day job. It's not going to be the thing that builds towards liberation for people. At the end of the day, I have to shut my work phone off and understand that there's another role that where I can add value to this world. And it's not necessarily through my day job. I have been working on releasing an album, I think, since like 2018. So I've been working on that. It's just taken a really long time because I think I've always been uncomfortable with identifying myself as an artist. First and foremost, I see myself as a servant of the people, and I let that take up most of my life instead of writing and creating. But I think the older I get, the more I realize that I want to be able to leave something tangible that, you know, when I'm gone, people can point to and say, okay, this is who she was and this is what she wanted us to hear. The future that I'm trying to build towards is one that is completely opposite of the future that I think we're headed to. I want to be able to work towards a future where the air is cleaner, where Black boys aren't murdered by police on a regular basis, where Palestine is free, where Indigenous women don't have the highest rate of murder and kidnappings. That's the future that I hope I'm building towards.
Artists have a choice. You can serve your own interests, you can serve the interests of the oppressor, or you can serve the people. Art has the ability to take the most complex concepts, imperialism, capitalism, globalization, neoliberalism, and break it down in a way that regular folks can comprehend. And it is regular folks, the working class, that will be the vanguard of true and meaningful change.
How you showing love to the revolution? Fist in the air for years of persecution. For revolutionaries that were executed. I'm here to inspire you cause you're the next to do this. Madam repping New York like you're from Massachusetts. I don't wanna hear nothing about the drugs you're using.